Okay, we're here with the two candidates for Orange County Judge in Group 15. Thanks for coming today. We're going to start out with a couple of questions that we ask all of our candidates. We usually ask them first thing to get them out of the way. The first question, we'll start with you, Mr. J, is have you ever been arrested?
I've never been arrested.
Okay. Mr. Duckworth?
No.
Okay. Mr. Duckworth, have you ever declared bankruptcy?
No, I have not.
Okay. Mr. J?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Mr. J, why are you running for judge in this particular opening?
Well, I think even though you do a lot of unpleasant business in court, a courtroom should be a pleasant place. You have to be efficient, you have to be fair, you have to be patient. And sometimes there's challenges with doing that in a manner that conveys that it is a pleasant atmosphere. And that's some of what I've seen in the past in other courtrooms. I've practiced everywhere from Pensacola to Miami. And I ran for this particular seat because I think it's important to have judges who want to be pleasant, but yet do the business that is sometimes unpleasant and get the job done.
And Mr. Duckworth?
Well, in my almost 19 years of experience, I have really, before last year, really had not given much serious consideration to running for judge. I was approached earlier this year about running in this, when this seat became open, that it was a situation that, under the circumstances, appeared appropriate for me. I have, the things that I, as a practicing attorney in both criminal and civil law over the better part of the last 19 years, I have seen pretty much the entire spectrum of judges from good to bad. And I saw the opportunity when the sitting judge, Judge Ansbro, decided to retire, that this was the race for me, that this was the position. I think I've got more to offer. I think I'm the better, more well-rounded candidate. That's why I chose this particular spot.
And so you mentioned you hadn't thought about running before, so this is your first run for judicial office?
Correct. It's the first time I've run for any office. I went through I was in the process of, there was an opening for an appointment that the previous county court judge, Greg Tynan, and I apologize, I don't recall what that seat number was. He was appointed by Governor Scott to the circuit bench, and this Tanya Wilson was just recently appointed to that position. But that was a position that I was in the mix for, one of 38 candidates. But as a first-time applicant, the chances of a first time, it's virtually impossible, especially with 38 candidates. So being pragmatic, and when approached to run, I talked to my wife and we gave it serious consideration, and I decided that this was the time to transition from my, I've been in a successful private practice now for almost 15 years, to go ahead, instead of going through with the appointment process, to go ahead and put my hat in the ring and run.
Mm-hmm. When was that other appointment made?
The appointment was made, I want to say it was right after the qualifying date, and that's why I did go through with the interview, mm-hmm. and I understand I made it to the second round, which was probably, maybe 10, but didn't make it to the final 6.
Mr. J, Mr. Duckworth suggested he is the better candidate for this position. What distinguishes you from Mr. Duckworth in this race?
Well, we've both prosecuted. We've both handled criminal defense. He does have some civil experience that I do not have. But I'm a board-certified criminal trial attorney. 75% of these county court divisions are criminal divisions. Board certification is not only a recognition of expertise, and it's the highest recognition the Florida Bar gives. It's a recognition of character, professionalism, and ethics as well. So I'm recognized by the Florida Bar as one of a very small percentage of lawyers who are board certified, much less board certified in the area where 75% of these divisions operate. I also have managerial experience. For the last year and a half at the State Attorney's Office, I have served both as the County Court Bureau Chief, which of course is relevant to a county court seat, and as a trial unit director. As the county court bureau chief, I was responsible for supervising all of the prosecutors who prosecute in all of the criminal divisions that serve Orange County. So that would be the 2 out at the jail, the 1 devoted to domestic violence, and the 10 devoted to criminal day-to-day work. So I have supervised those lawyers, and now I continue to do so, but now I have different responsibilities since we've restructured the office. I also supervise lawyers prosecuting in the felony division. But I think what speaks volumes is what the people that I supervise think of me and what they say. And they are some of the biggest supporters I have. And people will delay being promoted because they don't want to leave my unit. They would rather wait for a spot in my unit so they do not have to leave and go to another of the 4 different units that we have downtown, or one of the units that we have at Juvenile or Osceola. So I think with that managerial experience and the recognition and just simply making the choice to work hard and earn that board certification, I think it reflects that I will work hard. I will always be prepared. I will always come into court ready to go. I will not have to sit and read the case law that the lawyers have cited. I will have done so ahead of time. And that's my reputation. And I just believe, after having been in court nearly every day for 17 years and then also having this managerial experience, I'm the better candidate. A lot of what a lawyer or judge does is he manages people. He manages lawyers and he manages non-lawyers. And you have to do so in a way that is not negative. And going back to the first question, I mean, that's some of what I saw in this particular seat, and that's why I ran for it, was lawyers being told that they're the worst lawyers they've ever seen in their lives, or that they're doing the worst voir dire or the worst job that the judge had ever seen. I don't think that's appropriate. I think you build people up. I don't think you tear people down. You especially don't do it in a courtroom full of people with other lawyers there, or particularly if you're in private practice, your client there, or as a prosecutor if your victims are there. If there's something going on that needs to be addressed with a lawyer, you pull them up to sidebar and you address it quietly outside of the earshot of all the other lawyers, the clients, and the jurors. So that's why I'm running. That's why I think I'm a better candidate.
I want to give Mr. Duckworth a chance to flesh out his qualifications, but first, quickly, Mr. J, have you run for a judge before?
I've never run before.
Uh-huh.
I have gone through the application process several times for the JNC.
Uh-huh.
And it's my understanding that, like Mr. Duckworth, I've come close but never gotten out on the list.
Did you apply for county judge openings or circuit judge openings or both?
Circuit court openings happen much more frequently.
Uh-huh.
So I would say if maybe 1 or 2 county spots. They just don't come up as quickly.
Uh-huh. And how many circuit spots?
Oh, I think 5 or 6 times. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Duckworth, you alluded to your qualifications, but only briefly. So here's an opportunity to get more into them.
Okay, thank you. Well, like I said, I've been practicing the better part of 18 years. It'll be 19 years September. The first 3 years of my practice were as an assistant state attorney. I was hired by Lawson. I interned at the office as a certified legal intern. And as a certified legal intern, I was able to try cases. Somebody had to sit at the table with me, an attorney. That's where I met my wife, who I've been married to now 17 years, and we have 3 kids. My oldest is going to be a sophomore at Boone, where I went to school. After my 3-year commitment to Lawson Lamar, I left and I decided I'm not going to go into criminal defense. I'm going to go into civil work. I went to go work with an older Orlando attorney, Sid Parrish, who's been in town since the 60s. I worked with Sid about 1.5 years, and then I went into business with Greg Stoner, a person who I'd grown up with in Orlando. And Greg and I were partners about 7 or 8 years. We did nothing but civil practice. Tried civil cases. I've tried jury trials. I've tried non-jury trials. I've tried lots of cases as a prosecutor. I've tried lots of cases now. In the course of my practice with Greg, he began to transition his practice into a different area. I began to take in some criminal cases because, quite frankly, I love being in the courtroom and I love trying cases. And that was the opportunity, and I found that while it was not as financially rewarding being a criminal defense attorney, I found that my quality of life and my quality of practice was more significant, and I really found my joy again in being in court and trying cases. So I transitioned completely out of the civil practice about 8 years ago, and I've done nothing but criminal defense. In terms of management, I've run my own office. I do everything A to Z that comes in and goes out. I've hired people, I've fired people, I do everything. I do the books, I do the payroll, I do all that. I don't do my tax returns. I've got a CPA for that. I'm smart enough for that. But in terms of board certification, that's absolutely, there's kudos to that. I have tried more than an adequate number. I've had over 100 trials, and I've had more than an adequate number of trials. There's a test that you have to take. I just haven't taken the test, and really it is a time commitment to sit down and do that. And my hat's off to anybody that spends the time to do that. Quite frankly, that would not make me any different a lawyer than I've been all these years simply taking the test. There's some recognition in that, but it doesn't, and it's part of it is also a business decision in that I can't count on one hand the number of times I've had a potential client come in and ask me about board certification. It becomes somewhat of a business decision whether I'm going to take that time and spend all the requirements that we have of life, of running the business and of having kids and the marriage and all those other things that come into play, to take that time to sit down and I've just, as a business decision, there's certainly nothing wrong with board certification. I think it's good, but it wouldn't make me one bit of a different lawyer having studied for a test. I've tried the cases, and I think that I've got I'm confident I've got the respect and admiration of fellow prosecutors that I work with on a regular basis, and certainly the defense bar and the civil attorneys that I work with.
You've both brought up aspects of judicial temperament in your own way. You want to address that more fully? Is there any judge who you've admired as a role model? And I know you particularly mentioned just some very bad practices. So if you'd like to address maybe what in particular you would bring as an ideal judge, and any role models that you might say.
Sure, I'll go first. What I bring to the table, and why I feel that I've gotten so much support from my fellow attorneys and past presidents of the bars, they know my temperament, they know me, and they know me by reputation as being very even-keeled and unflappable. I think that it is certainly in this race. The issue of experience really is not one that to argue. It's not a situation where somebody's tried a lot of cases and someone's tried zero. I know some other judicial races that's the case. It's not the case here. I think what in my opinion, what makes me stand out from my opponent in this case is that I feel that I have the right judicial temperament. I think by reputation that fellow prosecutors and defense attorneys, and I could sit here all day and tell you what I think about myself, but I think it speaks volumes for the people that have loaned me their name in terms of an endorsement, that feel confident enough in my abilities and my temperament and what we want as a society, but also what I think the general attorneys and what the bar, they want somebody who's going to be fair, and they want somebody who's going to be consistent, and they want somebody that they're going to have confidence in, because that's what we want the public. We want to have confidence in the system that everybody's going to be treated fairly, regardless of your race or your religion or any of those other preferences. You want to be treated fair, and I've got that reputation, and that's what I bring to the table, and I'm confident in that.
You mentioned endorsements, Mr. Duckworth. Could you excuse me? You mentioned endorsements. Can you rattle off some of the endorsements that you've received?
I've been endorsed by 19 past presidents of the Orange County Bar Association. I've been endorsed by Linda Chapin, past former Mayor Bill Frederick. I've been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. I've been endorsed by the AFL-CIO. dozens and dozens of attorneys, Andy Gardner, Senator Andy Gardner. And what I think, and endorsements are certainly nice, and that's something to talk about, and you know, Will's got plenty of endorsements too, but what I feel, the spectrum of endorsements, the range of even though we're running for a nonpartisan position, I've got the entire range of the political spectrum, so to speak, from the right to the left, have endorsed me. Phil Rampey's endorsed me. And I think that speaks volumes. That you've got people from the entire spectrum of politics know me enough that somebody on the far right is going to give me an endorsement, just like somebody on the far left is going to give me an endorsement, because they know me to be fair. And I think that it's not a partisan race. And I think somebody or a group of people were very smart years ago when they made the determination in Florida that the trial judges should not be a partisan position. Partisan politics should have nothing at all to do with county court, with the trial court. Those are partisan politics are for, you know, policy-making decisions. You know, we're judges. We're not here to make policy. We're not here to change the law. We're here to follow the law and do it in a fair and equitable manner.
Okay, we want to catch up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr.
I
J,
know.
the question about temperament and perhaps a model judge, and then you can, if you want to transition to anything you want to say about your endorsements.
Sure. First, I'd like to correct him. He said he was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. I'll let him correct himself.
I apologize. I was endorsed by the Police Benevolent Association, the other police union. Will J was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me.
But I agree temperament is a huge issue for judges. That's why I ran for this seat. I saw a temperament issue in Group 15. I think it's nice to have endorsements, but the endorsements that mean the most are the endorsements from people who know both of us and the endorsements that come from people who are my opponent. I have dozens and dozens of criminal defense attorneys who have endorsed me, and these are people that I've had to try murder cases against. These are people that I have to tell no to all the time, because as a prosecutor and quite frankly as a judge, a lot of what you do all day is you tell people no. Somebody has to be told no in a courtroom, one side or the other. And a lot of times as a prosecutor, you have to tell people no. And you have to do so without the benefit of saying, well, my client just won't agree to that. As a prosecutor, you don't have a client. You might have a victim, and sometimes you have a victim, but that victim's rights do not necessarily equate to what is just and what is right. And so as a prosecutor, sometimes it's difficult to be able to tell people no, and then they just blame the prosecutor for being unreasonable because the prosecutor doesn't have a client that they can blame their position on. A prosecutor has to wake up and decide every day, and so does a judge. You know, what's the right thing to do after listening to all the facts from both sides and listening, following the law. And so as a prosecutor, you know, it's more difficult to earn a great reputation as being a super nice guy when you tell people no all day. Whereas a defense attorney, when I was a defense attorney, all you're doing is asking people for things. And the way to get things, in my opinion, is with honey, not vinegar. So it's a very different experience. I've been a prosecutor for 14 years. But my reputation as a prosecutor is that I am very even-keeled. I just stick to the law, stick to the facts, and that's just how I am. And I think that's what a judge should do, is stick to the law, stick to the facts, not play favoritism. And as far as endorsements, I think the endorsements that I'm most proud of are the ones from defense attorneys. And several of them have left lengthy quotes about how fair they think I am and how good of a judge I will be. And I think that's a huge compliment coming from people that I have to tell no all the time and that I might have tried murder cases against. And as far as the political spectrum, I mean, it's the same thing with my list of endorsements. I have support from, what we would call the political left. I have support from the political right, and from people I quite frankly have no idea what their political views are. But I've been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, the Firefighters Union, Dick Batchelor, a community philanthropist, John Morgan, and Dean Mosley, former very prominent Republican. So there's all sorts of people from all sorts of different political spectrums on both of our endorsement lists. So what you really have to do, in my opinion, is go by the qualifications. And I feel that my qualifications are better and that I'm better suited for the seat.
Mr. J, have you ever been disciplined by the Florida Bar?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Duckworth?
No.
Okay.
Well, gentlemen, we want to talk a little bit about your experience outside the courtroom as well. Are there some experiences outside the courtroom that you think will better prepare you to be a judge more so than your opponent?
Well, there's certainly in judges, the life experience is certainly very important. My experience as a small business owner and running the firm, that certainly, outside the courtroom has certainly been eye-opening, and it's been rewarding. I have been active with my kids growing up. I was a youth football coach. I volunteer for my middle son's swimming. I volunteer for the Boone Cross Country team. Those being around the kids and spending that time, it really has helped. It's nice to step back from, especially doing what I do and dealing with the folks that I deal with on a regular basis. I spend a lot of time at the jail with clients. It's taking a step back and putting things in perspective about the things that are most important in life, and then we're constantly, reevaluating and seeing what and how I can bring those life experiences to my practice. I have to be certainly empathetic to clients and family members. When I have clients that are, they've hired me because they've been charged with murder or they've been charged with robbing somebody, and in all likelihood, if they're going to be convicted, they're going to spend the rest of their life in prison. And those experiences outside the courtroom, being active in my church, it grounds me. And I think it allows me to, be calm and assess things. And like I said, I've got the reputation for being fairly unflappable. And if I can herd, I used to call it herding cats. When my son was in 3rd grade and coaching the football team, trying to keep them all in order. It's that perspective, I think, of being able to do that has benefited me greatly.
Mr. J, same question.
Well, I think the most important thing to say about my life experience is that I've gone from coming from a home where nobody wanted to be in, including myself, to having a home and a family now where everybody wants to come over. Our house is where we have more foot traffic on the weekends than some small restaurants. Either my wife and I's friends or our 3 children's friends, who vary from ages 8, 16, and 18. I grew up in a home where both my parents were alcoholics. I was embarrassed to bring people over to my house. I suffered probably some social ostracism from, the conditions I came from. My mother got sober before my father. That resulted in her asking him to leave. So for a period of time, I lived, it was just my mother and my brother and I. About the time that my father decided to get sober as well, I was in a horrible car accident in 8th grade, missed most of the academic year. But I came back, I continued to play sports, and they reconciled since they were both sober. And then my mother got diagnosed with lung cancer. And so from 9th grade until just before 11th grade, she struggled with lung cancer until she passed away. And I came to a crossroads really in my life. I grew up in a little dairy farm kind of little town that had more cows and dairy farms than stoplights. Am I going to stay or am I going to go? And I chose to go. I went south to Florida, from Connecticut to Florida Southern College, used life insurance money that I received from my mother's passing to help pay for my undergraduate tuition. I worked at the chemistry lab on campus. I lifeguarded. I worked in the weight room. I worked waiting tables a semester off campus. And I graduated within 3 years instead of 4. Summa cum laude, highest honors with a degree in criminology, because I was interested in crime, interested in society and sociology. And then I went on to law school at Boston University, and I graduated with honors there. And I started at age 20. I couldn't go out and have a beer with everybody else during the first semester because I was the only 20-year-old. And then from there, I moved down to Florida in Orlando, and I honestly don't know why. It might sound cliche, but God pointed me and said, rent that little studio apartment behind the Red Cross at Central and Bumby. And I did, and I slept on a mattress. I didn't have a TV. I studied for the bar. When my car broke down, I rollerbladed to bar review. I rollerbladed to the gym, and I rollerbladed to the car shop to get my car when it was repaired. I didn't know anybody at that point. And 17 years later, I have gone from nothing to being a manager at the biggest law office, I believe, in Central Florida with 150 attorneys, with certainly the biggest amount of caseload every year. And I have a beautiful wife who's successful too, and 3 wonderful children. The oldest just graduated valedictorian and is going on to UF, and the middle child is on track to do that as well with her AP classes and whatnot. So I think I can really relate to the sorts of struggles that you see people facing in court every day, and I think being empathetic to those issues is very important. And it also demonstrates hard work. You can go to college, but you can go to college and graduate with highest honors if you work. You can go to law school, but you can graduate with honors if you work. And that's just always been my work ethic, and it has made me just really, really believe in fairness. And by fairness, I mean it doesn't matter who you are, who you know, who your parents are, or anything like that. When you come into a courtroom, either in a file that I'm prosecuting or defending, or as a judge, the only thing that should matter are the merits of the case that are presented by the lawyers, the facts, and the law. And so I feel I bring that to the table. And I've also coached. I've done a slew of community service things that are on my website. But, you know, I'm so obsessed with fairness that when I was coaching youth soccer, I would break down the number of positions we had on the field, the number of players, and I made sure to the second they all got equal playing time. And that's just who I am.
Just have a couple of quick follow-up questions for you, Mr. Judge. Are you aware of what the passing rate is on board certification exams?
Yes, I did want to address that at some point because I don't know if it's minimizing it or not, but I mean, the Florida Bar website says it's the highest honor they give out to anybody. 28% of the people passed the test when I took it. It's not an easy test. There are people in other races that didn't pass the test. So I think it's important. And again, it's not just about expertise in the field of law. You don't get to sit for the test until you pass a peer review process. And I know there's several people who try to do that and they don't get through the peer review process. You get evaluated by your peers based on the last 5 trials you've done. You list opposing counsel, you list the judges, and then you list some other references. And then they spider web it out. You know, the Florida Bar will contact each of those people and say, all right, well, you know, send us to 3 or 5 more people who might know this candidate. And so I don't think you should really understate the value of having that board certification because it's a peer review process and it's a blind peer review process. I have no idea what any of the people said when the Florida Bar inquired about me.
The other question was, I believe you worked in you've had 2 stints in the prosecutor's office with some time in private practice in between, correct?
Well, actually 3.
3, okay.
After fulfilling my 3-year commitment, like Mr. Duckworth did, I did step out very briefly, and that's why I don't even really cite it. And I worked at Morgan & Morgan. And I did workers' compensation. But I quickly realized, as Mr. Duckworth did, that I miss being in the courtroom. The end game, if you get to the end game in workers' compensation, is a hearing officer room over, across the way at West Robinson Street. And I quickly realized within a month or 2 that this was not for me. And so I told Mr. Morgan, I really appreciate it, but this isn't for me. And he told me, Will, I admire your passion for justice and the law and the fact that you want to be in the courtroom, and we need people like you. And so even though I left a job that was certainly going to be way more lucrative than what my current job is, I did have that brief stint. It was like 2 months, and I came right back to the state attorney's office. And yes, I did go into private practice with 3 other people, Amir Ladan and Keith Karsten. Keith is now a judge, so now it's just the Ladan Law Group, and the other associate was Monica Victorica. And while I was in private practice, I quickly became board certified. I became death qualified, and what that means is I became qualified to defend people accused of murder who were facing the death penalty. It's right in the criminal rules. You have to meet a certain list of requirements, such as experience handling murder trials, and then going off and getting 12 continuing legal education credits regarding the death penalty and how to do it. I mean, it's the most important defense you can put on. And I immediately put myself on the list to volunteer to do that. Never had the opportunity because, quite frankly, in the Ninth Circuit, we don't seek the death penalty very often. But I through referrals, I defended people everywhere from Miami to Pensacola. I had a client that, I begged them. I said, please, just go find an attorney in Pensacola, who knows the judge, knows the prosecutor. And no, they insisted and put money in a trust fund to fly me back and forth to Pensacola. And it's a good thing, in my opinion, because that kid was just freshly 18 years old. He was accused of having sexual relationship once with his girlfriend, who was 15 years and 7 months. So that's a lewd battery charge because she was under 16. And the state attorney's office up there wanted him to plead to a sex offense, which would of course mean potentially a lifetime of registration, being a convicted felon, and through a lot of negotiation and a lot of work, I got them to drop the sex offense. And they still treated him a little harshly, I think, compared to how we would handle it at this state attorney's office, but got him a withhold of adjudication on a non-sex offense and got him some probation so that he could go on and serve in the military like his parents had. So I've had a lot of experience defending people too.
So you've had experience defending people. It sounds like fulfilling experience. So why did you go back to the prosecutor's office?
Well, the Florida Prosecuting Attorneys Association divvies up the funds that get allotted by the legislature. A certain amount of funds come out of the general funds and they go to the Florida Prosecuting Attorney Association. And then through a funding formula, they divvy it up to the 20 different judicial circuits of state attorneys. This circuit was heavily underrepresented financially for some time, and in speaking with people at the state attorney's office, people in the homicide unit at the time, and other managers that I knew, and I'd maintained relationships over there, the word on the street was that during the 2011 legislative session, these things were going to get addressed. And so I came back in March of 2011, and I served as a career criminal lead prosecutor for 4.5 months, and then August 1st, when the new homicide spot opened up, I took over that homicide spot, and then I prosecuted homicides as I'd always wanted to do for the next 1.5 years prior to Mr. Ashton winning the election, and then that's when I got asked to serve as manager.
Okay. Mr. Duckworth, I apologize. I've left you. You haven't had a chance to speak for a while. Did you want to address anything that Mr. Jay said? Or?
No, I think that certainly our experiences in what we do, but what I would certainly like to emphasize is the fact that I have cultivated and run a successful business for the last 15 years, and my cases all come in strictly by referral. And I don't advertise, and it's unless I do a good job and my clients are confident in my abilities, I don't work and I don't eat. So I think that speaks volumes of running an office and certainly preparing me to be a judge. I certainly enjoyed my time at the state attorney's office. I found it very fulfilling, but it's simply with the burden of student debt that I had, and I was married while at the state attorney's office. And my wife had student loans. It just was financially not feasible to remain, and so hence I went into private practice, and it's the rest is history. I've run this successful business ever since.
Since you have run a successful business for 15 years, can you give us an example of how you've reduced costs in your law practice? Oh,
I have to, especially now being a solo practitioner, every dollar that's wasted is ultimately a dollar that is lost on me. in terms of and having to support, you know, my wife and kids and all that. What I do, well, there are several things that we do. For the most part, I am personally involved in A to Z of everything that we do. In terms of the payroll, I've taken on that additional burden to be more efficient, not paying a bookkeeper. I'm able to do that, and you know, thank God there's smarter people than me that have developed software to help us with that kind of stuff. But that has been an ongoing, and another thing that I've done is, for a while, when I was still partners with Greg, we had our own office, and what I have since done is I share space now with a larger firm, so I'm able to downsize, and I use essentially the space, and I'm able to utilize, you know, a copy machine and fax machine and a receptionist and things like that that I otherwise would have to waste money by duplicating those things if I had my own office. So the efficiency is, with any solo practitioners, that's, you know, number one. But in what I do in my criminal defense practice, that certainly can't stand in the way of providing my clients with the service and having to spend the funds, and generally, but not always, generally what we try to do is we try to get cost deposits for things like experts and depositions, but unfortunately sometimes, especially in this economy, if I have a client, for example, that's in jail and his family has gathered money and they paid part of the fee and they're trying to pay as time goes on, but we have to take depositions. Routinely, that's just money that I'm going to have to spend, and ultimately I have to eat, and I have to eat on a regular basis. I try not to, but it's part of the job, and I understand that, and I don't complain. I go forward and have to do it, but it's certainly a balancing test, and I think that being a judge, efficiency certainly is very important, but you always have to have your eye on the due process and what it's got to be either fair to my client in what I do as a defense attorney, or as a criminal defendant, or as a litigant. Because of my civil experience, there's a very good chance I could go to the civil division of the county court and handle things like landlord-tenant law, which I have experience in because I own rental properties. And in my rental properties, I've had to evict people. I've got experience in that. Another, and probably I think the single largest type of case in terms of volume in county court are what are called PIP suits, or suits that involve personal injury protection, which is auto insurance that everybody in Florida has to have. That litigation over those fees. I dealt with that in my civil practice. I dealt with it a little bit on both sides. It's having that well-rounded experience and having my feet wet in that area, and that wasn't a brief period. There was a period of 5 to 6 years where all I practiced was civil law. But I think that experience, coupled with my significant trial experience on the criminal side, I've tried, like I said, and I've also done appeals. I've done criminal appeals. I've done that have been reported over at the Fifth. I've won appeals. I've lost appeals. But that experience, I think, gives me the perspective, the right perspective, coupled with my temperament to make me the person for the job.
Okay, I think we're going to have to, just so we can stay on schedule, we're going to have to conclude. Thank you both for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.